in the Grossman model, we were talking about health stock being distinguished as a consumption good and as a capital good. And then last time we were concentrating on the second point, that is, we were looking at health stock as a capital good, and we said that we are analyzing a production model, as in you use the medical inputs, medical care inputs, that is, you use health care to produce your health stock. So the output is the health stock, the inputs are the health care goods and services that you can use. Remember? And in that context, we were talking about the marginal efficiency of capital or the marginal efficiency of the healthcare inputs, and then we saw how the health stock changes based on an individual's conditions, and the individual's conditions are based on his age, education, wages and wealth, right. So that is where we stopped. Now, if you think about the stock of health, the H star that we were talking about, this H star can be improved or created, like we mentioned last time, by some medical care inputs. Let us call that capital M. So you can directly put money into the medical care inputs and you can get a better stock of health. You can also use some other inputs which are non-medical care, okay. For example, exercise, better diet, better food. So you can put in some non-medical care inputs which are denoted by capital X, but more importantly, besides the direct inputs, beside the consumption of the direct inputs, there is also a consumption of time, the time that you put in for these inputs. For example, if you are consuming the services of a doctor, then the doctor services are included under M, but the time that you spend at the office of the doctor, that goes under TH, correct. Similarly, if you are having a better diet, then X is the better diet, but the time that you need for preparing the better diet, for preparing the better food, that goes under TH. So what we are trying to say is that health stock is a function of the direct medical or healthcare inputs, other inputs, and since TH is the time that could be invested on healthcare inputs or on non-healthcare inputs, that is why we call TH as the time for improving health. The time for improving health. So you can understand that that time could be the time that is put into healthcare or the time that can be put into non-healthcare, but the objective of using that time is to improve your health status or your health stock, that is H star. That is the objective of using that time, okay. Is that clear? Now, if you think about the entire time frame, you know, now going back to microeconomics, the utility maximizing framework, we said that individuals try to maximize their utility, individuals try to derive maximum benefit given some constraint, right. And in the context of microeconomics, we were thinking that that constraint is the budget constraint or the income constraint. So if you recall from microeconomics, you were told that if there are two goods in this world, and if you were going to buy those two goods without saving any of your income, then your total income can be distributed between the consumption of those two goods. So whatever you spend on those two goods has to be constrained by your total income. Remember? Yes? Similarly, just like income, time is also a constraint for individuals. You don't have, time is not free, first of all, and you do not have infinite amount of time available to you. Now, you could consider the time constraint on a daily basis, which is 24 hours. You could consider the time constraint on a weekly basis, which is 7 days. You could consider it on a monthly basis. You could consider it on a yearly basis. Okay. Let us consider, since we are talking about something like health care, and usually health, you know, somebody, if you are talking about the health status of a person, in most circumstances, the health status would not change as fast as 24 hours between today and tomorrow. Usually that would be uniform. So we consider the maximum time frame available to be 365 days. That is just a special case that we are considering. The maximum time that you have available to you is capital T, which has the numerical value of 365 days, that is 1 year. So instead of saying 365 days, I could have said 1 year, or I could have put 12 months there. The unit does not matter. But the idea is we are looking at a time horizon which is 1 year. So how much you can improve your health by the use of health improving time and the use of medical care inputs and the use of non-medical care inputs is constrained within that time horizon. Okay? Now this capital T, that is the maximum time that is available to you, this can be split into different activities, right? The entire year you do different things during this entire year. So we split that time into 4 categories. Okay, before I go further, kind of coming back to this equation, why are we doing this in the first case? Why are we talking about this? Because remember, we were talking about a production model last time, right? Production model, like I told you, is anything where you use the inputs to produce an output. So we are still on that production model where we are still looking at these inputs, but now we are looking at some commodities, medical care commodities, non-medical care commodities, and we are also looking at a time input. So it's still a combination of inputs that is used to produce the output. So this is still a production function. This is still a production model, but now we are just concentrating on the time input. Last time we were concentrating on this healthcare input, right? Now we are concentrating on that. Okay, and after kind of looking at this, we will use the utility maximizing framework rather than the production framework. We will use the utility maximizing framework for that. Okay, that is where we are heading, just in case you are wondering what we are doing. So capital T, which is the total time, the maximum time, that is 365 days, that can be split into several things. We are grouping it into 4 categories. The first category is, of course, TH, the same TH. So it has the same meaning, that is the time for improving health. The time that you put into work, okay, TW. Time for leisure, and I am writing it as TB, a subscript B. I do not know why it is B, what B stands for, I have no idea, but I am using B because the notes that I am going to give you from the textbook, that uses B, okay? But I do not know what that B stands for, but TB is basically the time for leisure. And there is another element, that is TL, which is the time lost for ill health. So basically that's the time you are lying on bed not doing anything, okay, if you are bedridden. So you can split time in that way. So you have 4 categories, and you could think of other categories also, but usually all the different things that you can do with your time over 1 year, you can put them into one of those categories. So TW is basically the time that you go to work, TB is anything that is leisure. Now this is also called the time for home production. And why are we calling this the time for home production? Because in economics, as long as you are active, as long as you are doing something, it is producing something, okay? If you are watching TV, you are producing entertainment for yourself. If you're sleeping, you're producing relaxation for yourself. So as long as you're doing something, it is production of something is taking place. But that production is not market production, as in that activity is not going through the market, and hence you cannot assign a price or a value to it. If you sleep for 8 hours and I ask you what value did you gain out of it, you can only give me a subjective assessment. You can only say that I feel fresh or I feel energized, but you cannot say that I have gained value of $100, right? But if you buy 2 shirts from the market, you spend $1 on, so you spend 1 hour on shopping and you buy 2 shirts, then the value that you have gained out of that 1 hour is probably the market price of those 2 shirts. Okay? If you spend 3 hours mowing your lawn, it's your house, it's your lawn, you did not get paid for it, then it's home production. You have productively used your time, but you cannot attach a numerical value to it. Do you see what I am saying? So that's why that is also called the time for home production. Basically the activities that you do at home, something like sleeping, watching TV, cooking, mowing lawn for your own house, those things will go in there. Then you have the time lost for ill health, which is basically your sick days, that you are lying on bed without indulging in any kind of work or home production. Okay? So this is not included in TB. TL is not included in TB. It's a separate category altogether. Okay? Then in this equation, let me call this equation 1. From equation 1, can I say that 365, because the value of capital T, as you can see, is 365. So I am just writing 365 instead of capital T. 365 minus TH minus TL is equal to TW plus TB, just rearranging the time, the terms on the 2 sides of the equation. Can I say that? Any problem? Just bringing them to the left hand side, bringing the 2 terms to the left hand side. Okay? So 365 minus TH minus TL is equal to TB plus TW. That is equation number 2. Now, what do I have on the right hand side? What does the right hand side of that equation signify? Can you tell me? It is basically your time that you do not spend on any, either the time that you spend, it is not the time that you spend on improving your health, or it is not the time that you are sick. So whatever you have on the right hand side of that equation does not have anything to do with your health. That time is not the time which you lose because of ill health, or it is not the time that you need for improving your health, right? Then that time is something which you can use for either increasing your own satisfaction or utility through leisure, or your own income through work, correct? The right hand side of that equation, will all of you agree? TW is the time that you spend for increasing your income, your potential income, and TB is the time that you can spend for increasing your overall utility or satisfaction from some leisure or relaxation activities, or by doing something you just like doing, right? And whatever you spend on your health or you lose because of your health is on the left hand side already. Is that correct? Okay. Now, that means if you can see, then this equation is kind of a constraint for you. In other words, it is telling you that the time that you can spend either for work or for leisure, or in other words, the time that gives you some kind of utility, either in the form of income or in the form of relaxation or in the form of added, just feeling good about doing something, subjectively feeling good, that is constrained by the time that you have left after improving your health and losing on account of sickness. Do you agree? Right? So any time that you have left after staying at the hospital, going to the doctor's office, buying your prescription medication and staying in bed, that is the time that you have available for either putting into your work or putting into something that you like doing. That is the intuition, that is the theory, conceptually that is what it means, correct? So, if I kind of, just like we did in microeconomics in the utility maximizing framework, now if I consider that my choice is between this time that I have available on the right hand side for work or for leisure, and the other choice that I have is earning an income, then in the utility maximizing framework, can I put that time on one axis, that is TW plus TB, and income on the other axis? Does this look like good 1 and good 2? Just like we had in income in the utility maximizing framework, good X and good Y, if you remember from a couple of weeks back. Because you can get utility from two things. Remember the microecon. Microecon said there are two goods in this world, X and Y, apples or oranges, and you can get benefit or utility from consumption of those two goods. There is nothing else in this world. Now we are saying that there are two things of value to you. It is either time or income. Those two things can give you satisfaction. So, time we are putting on the X axis, and why are we putting TW plus TB, and why are we not putting that entire 365 days? Because this is the time that actually can give you some utility, right? Either in the form of potential income or in the form of some subjective satisfaction. That is why we are putting that time. And income is just absolute income that you can earn. But please note that, like I said, that this is constrained, this time that you have available for either work or for leisure, this is constrained by that, right? So, it depends on how much is the TH, it depends on how much is the TL, because you cannot change the 365. So, it is constrained by this. If your TH is 0, if you never visit the doctor, if you have never been to the hospital and you have never bought prescription drugs, if you have never spent any time on health, therapy, rehab, anything, and you have never lost a day during this year for sickness, then both will be 0. In that case, you have that entire year, the entire 365 days for either working or for your leisure activities, fishing, right? But usually for most people, they will be having some positive value for TH, and many will have some positive value for TL, but that will not be the same for all individuals. My TH and TL are not the same as you, not the same as hers, correct? So, we are all constrained by these two variables, but the 365 is fixed. Now, please note that for microeconomics, where we were in the two goods world, that capital M that we had, the income that we had, this M, the M that you had here had nothing to do with this, right? This M was medical care inputs. There the M was your total income. That total income could have been different for us. My total income could have been 4,000, yours could have been 10,000, hers could have been 1,000. But here that capital T is the same for everybody. What is different is TH and TL. Please be clear about that. Okay? So, at the end of the day, the left hand side is different for everyone, but that difference is on the basis of TH and TL, but not on the basis of capital T. That is what I am trying to say. Okay? So, then what is the maximum point that I can achieve here? What do you think? For one individual, for any individual, what is the maximum? 365, basically 365 minus TH minus TL, but for someone that could be 0 and hence that would be 365, but more generally it is 365 minus TH minus TL, basically the constraint itself, right? And the maximum value that it could take is, 365. It cannot go beyond 365, provided TH and TL are 0. But for some individual, it can be less than 365 also. So, the more general case is this, correct? Now, this, what can I call this? This TWTB, I can say this is the time for work and leisure. So, that means I am measuring two things on the same axis. I am measuring work and I am measuring leisure. So, let us say from 0 to that direction, when I am measuring the usual direction of the x axis, I am measuring leisure in that direction, the number of hours put for leisure in that direction. So obviously, work has to be measured in the opposite direction. So what I am trying to say is if I have 10 hours, if I have total 10 days for work and leisure, out of that if I put 6 days for leisure, then I will be putting 4 days for work. Do you see what I am saying? Or let's say if this value is 365, let's say for a person TH is equal to 0, TL is equal to 0, then for that person TW plus TB will be equal to 365. You understand that? Now out of that 365, let me say that this person puts 65 days into leisure. Then obviously he puts the remaining, that is 300 days into work.
So why are the arrows going in opposite directions?
Because of that, because you cannot measure them in the same direction. One is minus the other. If you have income of 100 and you spend 40, then what is left in your pocket is 100 minus 40. So you have to look at it from the other direction. If this is 365, this is 360, it is 365 minus 360.
Currently on this graph, we're measuring the income gained or lost from our two utilities.
We are not measuring any income yet. We are just measuring time for now. We are just concentrating on the x-axis for now. All we are saying is that your x-axis measures the time that you can spend on either working or in your leisure activity.
But over there, we grouped them together. So why aren't they going in the same directions?
Because you can't be having leisure time when you're working.
Exactly.
But they're grouped together as one benefit. But if you solve for one.
I think it's just trying to show subtraction.
It seems like you would add them.
Why?
Plus sign there. It seems like plus.
Yes,
Add
so
365.
it adds up to 365. But now if I tell you that one of them is 360, how do you get the other side? 365 minus 360.
Okay.
So it's just don't think too much. Just think of it as subtraction. If this is bothering you, just think of it as work is 365 minus leisure. You know, just think of it that way. Anything that is left after leisure is work, and anything that is left after work is leisure. So it's like a dual thing. Okay? If that direction is complicated for you, then just don't focus on that. That's not so important. Okay. And then of course a person can have a maximum potential income based on whatever TW he puts in, right? So that income will be a function of the TW. If I put in 10 hours, possibly my potential income is more than somebody who puts in 1 hour, right? Correct? In general circumstances, may not be true based on how much I earn per hour, okay? But this is basically the maximum potential income of the individual, the maximum that that individual can earn. So it could be anywhere, it could be here, there, depending on what is the level. So now if I join those two lines, then I have something similar to the budget line, but obviously I cannot call this the budget line because this is not about the budget alone, rather it is about time and it is also about income. So I could call it the income leisure work line, but I am just calling it the income leisure line because leisure and work are kind of two sides of the same coin. So if you are not in leisure, you are working based on the x-axis. Now what do you think will be the slope of this line? What is the slope of the budget line from your microeconomics? Can you remember? Negative, but how do you express it? Mathematically, what is the formula? What is slope of the budget line? Price over what? Price of what? Over price of what? You had two goods, right? So if you remember, slope of the budget line was Px divided by Py, isn't it? Negative Px over Py, the price ratios, That was the slope of the budget line. And how did you get the slope of the budget line? You got it by simply doing change of y divided by change in x. Do you remember? Yes? So, similarly here, if you do change in y, your y is income, correct? So, here the slope of that line theoretically, and don't get lost in the math, okay, think about it conceptually. This is your change in the y, which is change in income for every change in the time that you allot for work or leisure. Isn't it correct? Change in income divided by change in the time that you allot for work or leisure, change in TW plus TB. That means basically change in y divided by change in x. In other words, it is how much does your income change if you use 1 additional hour for leisure, or how much does your income change if you use 1 additional hour for work. Means the same thing, because leisure and work, like we said, are the two sides of the same coin. So, whether I am looking at it from the leisure side or I am looking at it from the work side, it is basically the same thing. But it is conceptually, it is how much does your income change if you put in 1 additional hours of work, or how much does your income change if you put 1 additional hour of leisure. Now, what do you think that is called in the real world? If you work for 1 more hour, by how much does your income change? Yes, louder, louder. Hourly wage, right? So, that is your wage rate. Hourly wage is the wage rate. So, can I say that the slope of this line is the wage rate? Did everyone follow why it's the wage rate? Okay. What is slope? What is slope of any line? Change in y, rise over run. So, change in y divided by change in x. That is what it means. Here you have y as your income, and in the x you have the time that you can allot to either work or leisure, correct? TW plus TB. So, here the slope is change in income divided by the change in time that you can put in work or for leisure. The same thing, because what did you have in your microeconomics? I am digressing a little bit. In microeconomics, your slope of BL was Px over Py negative, which shows the line is downward sloping. But do not get confused by the fact that this is price of x divided by price of y. We got that. If you turn back your pages and see, we worked out change in y divided by change in x, and we took the reciprocal. That's how the price went there. The price of x went there. Similarly here, we are going to do change in y divided by change in x, which is your change in income divided by the time, the change in the time that you either put into work or you put into leisure, okay, because they are one additive thing. So, one must be the subtraction of the other, right, like we explained here. Now, if I ask you that how much does your income change if you work for 1 additional hour? That is exactly what we are measuring, and we do things at the margin. So, it is 1 hour at a time. Let us say you are in a job and your job pays you $10 per hour. Now, if I ask you how much will your total income change if you work for 1 extra hour? 10 more? What is that 10? That 10 is your hourly wage, that is the wage rate. Now, I can ask you that same question from the opposite side. I can say how much will your income change if you work for 1 hour less, if you watch TV during that hour and don't go for work. It's that same 10, 10 less, but the change in income is still that 10. What is that 10? That 10 is your hourly wage, which is the wage rate. Okay? So, wage rate is the hourly wage or the wage rate. Clear? Any questions? Can we move on? Now, based on this line, let me make this a little less messy. You can draw another one or stay on the same one. Okay. Now, based on this line, based on this constraint, now where an individual is going to be, that depends on the preference of the individual. My preference is not the same as your preference, is not the same as her preference, and preference of every individual, if you remember, is depicted by the indifference curve or IC. Those curves that we had, which were convex to the origin, remember, in microeconomics. We don't have to go back into the theory of those curves, and I don't think we did much theory on those curves, but if just to tell you that the indifference curve of the person can lie anywhere on that line. It can lie here like 0.1. So, an individual could be at a point like 0.1 based on his preference. Another individual could be at 0.2. So, somebody's indifference curve could look like U1 based on his preference. Another individual's indifference curve could look like U2 based on his preference. Okay. So, for this person staying within that same time constraint, that person likes a consumption bundle where he wants to earn more income, but puts less leisure time.
Remind me what an indifference curve is?
Indifference curve is a curve that depicts the preference of the individual. So, that means that a person, in terms of microeconomics, even if we both have the same income, we could have different preferences. Or in other words, you earn $100, I earn $100. So, we are same at that level. That means our constraint is the same, budget is the same for both of us, but I could be liking more oranges and less apples, but you could be liking more apples and less oranges, right? That same thing we are talking in this context. So, I am saying the time is fixed for everybody. For everybody this is true. It is 365 minus TH minus TL that is available for work or leisure for everybody, but the value of that point could be different, I agree to that, okay, for individuals. But this utility curve is telling you where you would lie on that income leisure line. At which point on that income leisure line will you lie? Because remember, what is the optimality point? It is that point of tangency from microeconomics. Just having the constraint is not enough. It does not tell you what you are going to buy and what you are going to choose. You need your preferences too. There are two sides to a decision. So, this curve just tells you, the position of the curve just tells you where an individual is going to lie on that line. Okay. In other words, let us say I have two people, I have two individuals. For both individuals, TH is equal to say 5 and TL is, let us say, 60. Okay. I have two individuals. For both of them, these are the parameters. And let us say both of them have the potential of earning the same income. Why? Because for them their TW plus TB will be the same, and let us say this potential line is also, this potential point is also fixed. That means the maximum that the two can earn is also the same. So, then you cannot differentiate those two individuals based on that line, can you? Are you getting my question? So, let us say I have two individuals. For the first one this is true, for the second one this is true, and also for the two individuals this point is fixed. It is the same, whatever value it may be, 5,000, 10,000, whatever. Then just on the basis of this line, can you differentiate those two individuals? You cannot, because for person 1 this will be 300, this point will be 300, that point will be 10,000. For person 2 that will be 300, this will be 10,000. So, just on the basis of that line you cannot differentiate those two people. But although if they have the same line, they could be lying on different points on that line, and they could be lying at different points based on their indifference curves, where their indifference curves are tangent to that line. Person 1 can have an indifference curve like U1 located at the top. Person 2 can have a preference or an indifference curve like U2 located at the bottom. Now, they are not the same individuals, right? because now individual 1 has a consumption bundle which is looking like this. That means he puts in that much amount of leisure, he likes that much amount of leisure, right? Correct? So he likes TB amount of leisure. Let's say the TB amount of leisure is 5. Okay. So what was his TH? Did I say 5?
Yes.
What did I have the value for?
5 and 6.
What was TL?
TL was
60. So his so 365 minus TH minus TL, that was 300, right, for that person. So now if he puts in 5 days for that guy, if he puts in 5 days out of the 300 for his leisure, then he can put in 295 for work, right? Now I can have the other person, the second individual. Also for the second individual you have TH is equal to 5, TL is equal to 60. Hence that person has 365 minus TH minus TL is equal to 300. So that person also has 300 for work or leisure. But please note that this person, the second person, he is a guy who likes more leisure. He enjoys that much amount of leisure and only that much amount of income. So he is different in that sense. So for this person, his TB is not 5, instead his TB is much more because he puts in more days on leisure. So his preference is more towards leisure, isn't it? So this is possibly a person who has the other way around, possibly. But definitely more than 5 because it is bigger than that. Do you see what I am saying? So possibly this is a person who has, say, 50 days of leisure, and then he would have 250 days for work. Do you see? And since this person, coming back to person 1, since this person 1 has more days for work, his income is higher. Now you see what the two of us are saying was the same. So since he is putting more time for work, that's why he has higher level of income. Since person 2 puts in less number of days for work, his income is lower. So although two individuals have the same income leisure line, they have the same slope and the same line, and those 2 points, the horizontal intercept and the vertical intercept, are the same based on the constraint, yet they can be at 2 different points on that line based on their preference or indifference curve. And like if you remember, the indifference curve just tells you what is your preference. In other words, what are the combination of the 2 goods that you like to buy? What is the combination of apples and oranges that you like to buy? So in this case, person 1 is probably a younger person. He wants to earn more and put less time in leisure. And maybe person 2 is a retired person. He gets pensional income and he wants to put in more of his time in just, leisurely activities. Preferences of the 2 people are different, although both of them may be spending the same time at the doctor's office and they may be staying in bed for the same time. Do you see what I am talking about in the real world perspective? Just 2 kinds of individuals we are talking about. Is that clear? Okay. Now, based on all this information, whatever we said, based on all this background information, where does the healthcare fit in, health and healthcare? Because that was the main premise of all this, right? We were not talking about work or leisure last week. We suddenly brought in work and leisure and we started talking about, the choice between leisure and the choice between work, or the choice between leisure and the choice between income. But we were not talking about any of that last week. Our main question was how much healthcare should we consume, or how much time should we put in healthcare needs, and hence how would our healthcare stock change. That is what we were doing in the production model. So let's say now we are saying that what happens if this TH increases, because that is the time for your improving health, right?
So you're asking how would it affect this graph?
Yes, that is where we are heading.
So for those two people, is the slope going to be the same, or is it different because technically their incomes and are changing?
It's the same.
The slope represents potential income.
Potential, okay.
If everything's
Yes.
perfect.
Correct. Slope is the same. The line is the same. Okay, so now what we are saying is we are just saying TH is more. What if somebody puts in more time into healthcare, or somebody puts in more time in general to improve his health? Okay. What if the time input increases? How is that going to affect the overall benefit or the overall utility of the person? Because now I will take you back to the first class of Grossman model. What did we say? We said that Grossman model says that health stock has two aspects. It's a consumption good, it's a capital good. When we were concentrating just on the capital good part, we were saying that if you use more healthcare inputs, you will produce more output, that is the better health stock, correct? But we kind of ignored that first part, that it is a consumption good. If it is a consumption good, it means that if you have better health stock, then you will be able to earn more wealth and you will be able to earn more income and hence have more benefit. That was the meaning of a consumption good, right? It was said that it's a consumption good, which means you will demand better health stock, and you demand better health stock because you think that by having better health stock, you are going to have less number of sick days, and so you will have a potential, a higher potential income, and hence you will have a higher potential lifetime wealth. So your overall utility or your benefit would be higher from having a better health stock, correct? Now we are saying that if you want to have a better health stock, then you have to increase that time for improving your better health, for improving your health stock. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, because we saw that, the inputs and all that, right? So the input part was done. Now we are talking in terms of time. So you have to improve the health stock. Now, if you put in more time, here, looking at this diagram, if you put in more time in improving your health, then do you agree that everything else staying the same, you will have less time for work or leisure? Correct? But also, if you put in more time for improving your health, then there is a big possibility that the time that you lose due to the sickness, that is going to go down. That's also another part, isn't it? If you put in more time at the doctor's office, get yourself treated, go into therapy, then the time that you lose staying in bed sick, that is also going to go down, isn't it? And if this goes down, then a couple of those days could be used for work or leisure. So that would imply more time for work or leisure, isn't it? Would you agree? That means, can you see two conflicting effects owing to those two things on the time that you have for work or leisure? That means on TB plus TW. Right? So what ultimately happens, whether you have more time or whether you have less time, will depend on which one is weighing higher than the other. If you put in more time there than this, then you will have less time. If you have more, if you have less, if this is higher, then you will obviously have more time. So it depends on which one overweighs the other, because those are two conflicting effects, right? In other words, it depends on the net gain or loss of time, isn't it? It depends on the net gain or loss of time. Now, let us consider a situation where there is net gain. Let me give you some numbers to kind of make that clear. Let's say there is a situation of net gain. So, initially time 1, let's say time 0.1, time 0.2. In time 0.1, let's say TH, that is the time that you spend on improving health, is 20. Here the time that you spend on improving health is 25. Okay. So, now you have less time. In time 0.2, just based on this information, you have less time available for work or leisure, everything else staying the same in the system, correct? Now, in time 0.1, let's say TL is 10. In time 0.2, let's say TL is equal to 2. Just cooking up those numbers, it could be anything. So, that means here my TW plus TB would have been 365 minus TH minus TL, right. So, 365 minus 30, what is that going to be? 335, right. That is the time that you have for work or for leisure. What about here? Here TW plus TB would be 365 minus 25 plus 2, correct? So, that is 27, right? Is it correct, my numbers? Okay. So, now you can see that based on this information, the information that I have given you here in this particular case, there is a net gain of 3 days at time 0.2. In the second instance, there is a net gain. It is not always necessary that there will be a net gain. It will depend on those numbers, the change. It will depend on those numbers. But if there was a net gain, like in this case, if you had a gain, what would you see here in this diagram? What do you think? And I will draw a fresh one. I don't like the messy one. And you please draw another one too in this one, in this case. There will be some shifts and stuff.
We changed the x-axis. Constraint to the left.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So, what do I expect to see here? Let us say I was here, okay, my IC was here, so I am a person who was here. Now, what happens? Is there any change in that income leisure line because of what has happened? Because of that net gain, what happens? Which way? What, right or left? Right? Correct? That way? Is it going to move in that direction? Yeah. Yes, right, because now the total time that you have for TW plus TB has increased by 3. So, this point is no longer fixed there. The potential time has increased. So, and it has increased by the 3 days. Right? Do you agree? And if you spend those 3 days, or if you spend even one of those 3 days, anything greater than 0, if you spend that on TW, then do you think that will increase? Yes? So, if there is a net gain in TW plus TB, and if you use any positive amount non-zero positive amount of that net gain in TW, then there is a chance of your potential income, maximum potential income rising. Do you agree? So either your budget line can look like this if you spend all that net gain in just leisure, or your budget line, sorry, not budget line, income leisure line. Your income leisure line can look like this. It will look like the blue line if you spend all those 3 days in just leisure. Your TW is 0 and those 3 days are entirely spent on TB. Then you are not gaining any income. You are just gaining some subjective satisfaction like more sleep, watching more TV, cooking more food at home. Or if you spend at least 1 day out of those 3 in going to work, then there is quite a possibility that your budget line will look like the red one, where the red one, if you see, is parallel, whereas the blue one has a fixed point there, the red one has a change in that. Are you following what I am trying to say? Yes? Let us kind of put those 2 cases in 2 small diagrams. Are you done? That means now under changed circumstances, my initial was here, you have 2 possibilities, right? But can you see in both cases I can be on an indifference curve which is on a higher budget line? Remember, we said that always we try to get the indifference curve which is higher and higher and higher. So given that the income leisure line is the blue one, there is no reason that the individual should stay at the utility level U1 or stay at IC U1. The individual can get a higher IC and hence will get a higher IC, right? Similarly here, there is no reason that the person should stay on the IC that is tangential to the black line. Instead, the person will try to move to a higher IC indifference curve. And you know, whenever an individual achieves a higher IC, it means he goes to a more preferred combination of the 2 goods. He goes to a more preferred point. So that means if the person is able to, which question are we trying to answer then? The question that we are trying to answer is it worth to put in more time for improving your health? That is the question we are trying to answer here. Write that question down. Is it worth to put in more time for improving health? So now you can see that the answer to that question is yes, provided you have a net gain in the time that is available for TW and TB. only then the answer to that question is yes. If it's a net loss, then this will move there, this will go inside, isn't it? Had there been a net loss of days, had that been 325 instead of 335, then this point would have been here and that point would have been there, and hence potential income would also have been less. So the answer to that question, the answer to the question that you should put in time for improving your health will be yes, provided you can ensure that there is a net gain in the time that is available for leisure or work. Okay? And when you have more time available for leisure or work, you definitely are going to get a higher utility. And that higher utility could come just from additional leisure, or it could come from additional leisure and additional potential income due to work. Do you see what I am saying? Did you get that down? So, it is worthy or it is worthwhile to invest time on improving your health, provided there is a net gain in the time that is available for TW, that is work, or TB, that is leisure. And as long as there is a net gain, there will always be higher utility for the individual because of either additional leisure, as in case 1, or both, that is additional work and leisure, as in case 2. Okay? And whenever there is additional work, there will be possibilities of additional potential income. Okay? So there we are stopping today and we are done with Grossman model. So this part I will put in lecture note 6.